So the biophoton is a pretty complex topic, and I only want to project something and for biophotons of humans. And I think it started with so-called ultra-weak photon emission of live organisms, discovered by Alexander Gurevich. And it has some very special properties, as we know of now. First, it's very weak. So you need either the very highly sensitive P photomultiplier tube or a very highly cooled CCD detector to detect them. And if it's about maybe 3 orders of magnitude weaker than what our eyes can sense. And about peculiar properties that it's also pretty broad band. I guess there may be more on the ultraviolet, but there are indications that they could cover entire visible spectral range. And it's spontaneous. So, but it's also shown that it's inducible, and particularly from the living organisms that can be stressed. So there are some nice patterns that you can see that it's related to the change, the variation of biophotons relates to the stress level, and its counting statistics. It's also just not like other photon emissions. So it's something that is strange. And early on, it had a lot of names tied to it, but I guess Professor Pop just coined the name of biophotons, and I'm particularly interested in biophotons of humans. But more interesting to this community might be the biophoton variations associated with the consciousness or mind state. And there are some studies we know of from the Rubik, and then for the biophoton changes, very conspicuous changes during the healing session. And so how to explain this? And also in Japan, there were many studies, count quite a lot of studies from this IS list, and to indicate that biophoton changes as a function of mental states, concentration, meditation, the changes varies a lot. And also I know that Dr. Cruz's Rhine Research Center also does this study and is measuring the biophotons from energy healers, which means there are some connections, but will meditation increase the biophoton, or will another altered state of consciousness reduce biophoton? So these are still not known. So over here, so we have essentially a matter that is a biophoton that can be measured. It has a spatial distribution, it has a temporal variation, it has some kind of mind state related alteration. And the theme of this conference is connection. So I'm trying to make some connection with the mind. So and this mind, as we know, we'll talk about consciousness, but it's just too big a topic. But the consciousness will boil down to the state of mind. The state of the mind will boil down to how neurons fire, how they connected eventually. So that's, but you can't, I don't believe that the mind can be isolated from the neuronal firing or neural connections. So eventually it might be some kind of autonomic modulation, and this could indicate physiological impact, pathological changes, or some kind of psychology factors. So we have this matter, we have this mind, and then how are they possibly connected? So that's what I'm very interested to find out. So what do we know about the biophoton? So we have this biophoton over here, which is a light emission. And then I think it's almost established that this one got related to mitochondria when during the organism live cell, when it just take oxygen in and out, there is oxygen consumption. So this kind of excited states. And there was a nice review paper by European groups that they put this together. So we know that this happens this way, although this is probably not a done deal, but this explains most of the stuff. So it's a kind of a multiple excited state transition. It has this, so it causes this some kind of a broad band spectrum. But how would our consciousness possibly play a role over here? So that was the question that I would like to pursue. And in my two papers published in last year and a series of papers, I was trying to basically try to understand the biophoton emission from this decay, the stress response perspective. So I consider that, okay, this biophoton is detected, and then, but this biophoton come from somewhere. You have to have somewhere to generate the mitochondrial activity, to generate the photons. Then the mitochondria, the respiration oxidative activities might be controlled, affected by external stress. But in human cases, it might be controlled somehow by some autonomic neuronal activity. So I consider this as, so any change, let's assume we have a consistent mitochondrial activity, consistent, stabilized, steady state of the biophoton, and then any change of that, it has to come from somewhere. It might come from exogenous stress, but it might also come from our brain does something to alter that. So with that, and then I put some, basically I consider this is the final, the photon detected, and then it's got to start from somewhere within the tissue or organism, live organism, and any change of that got to come from somewhere. So there is going to have some kind of a transfer pathway to transfer the stress to the final photon detection. So I put out some models and try to model there eventually to get that hyperbolic pattern, while it don't have to have that coherence whatsoever, some kind of those Poisson. It doesn't have to be the hyperbolic pattern to reach this shape. It can be something else. So, but with that, understand, so you can have different stresses like photic, chemical, and different stresses. But what about if this change of the photon generation to be measured as a variation of a biophoton? Actually, what if that comes from our neuronal modulation? What if our consciousness can change that? So if that's the case, and then if we know what's going on there, and then there is a pathway, then we can correlate with the measurement. So overall, so what could this approach possibly lead to? I would say I would like to provide a path of quantitative means for correlating observations. So let's assume biophoton activities, it can, because of this oxidative stress, it can be correlated with our neuronal activities. But our neuronal activities, they will cause neurophysiological patterns, that are EEG patterns or some other patterns. It should be observable. So if they all come from this, they should have a path through neuroscience models and try to make a connection between these. But if that's the case, and then altered states of consciousness should also be kind of open to modeling, which will be very, very difficult. However, will there be a way to connect some kind of basically the strengths of their altered state of consciousness, how far away from the normal state of consciousness along this way, and how strong the observations that we can measure, either biophoton or neurophysical patterns that is abnormal. And so can we make a correlation between them? And then we will have more tools, more information, more parameters to understand the phenomena that are difficult to do. And to summarize, And basically, I projected some patterns of biophoton emissions of humans. They could be spatial, they could be temporal, they could be spectral. I consider that there might be a path to connect those patterns with our neuronal activity in the fundamental side. And then those, particularly the biophoton emission of humans at altered states of consciousness, even though we have a very limited data. And in order to reconcile those patterns, and might need to have a way to use some way to let neuronal modulation to regulate a photogenic process of a biophoton emission. So make that path in order to connect between what we can measure from the object like biophotons, and then what we can actually correlate with the neuronal activity like EEG patterns. And I would like to point specifically to a study published in JSC in 2017, that the micro PK study in Brazil. And they mentioned that during the occurrence of a PK, there are substantial change, intense burst of EEG patterns like that over here. So something like this, if you want to know more, I think the path is to try to implement ways, try to connect and have a neuroscience model to eventually bridge between EEG or neurophysiology patterns with the patterns that falls within the SSC and then parapsychology, this domain, so we can make a definitive correlation either from the intensity of the that we can measure, or from energy perspective, or from maybe entropy perspective. We ought to make that connection in order to deepen our understanding of those patterns that definitely will relate to consciousness, but what is the true relationship